Hello, everybody. Welcome to day 7 of Spawn Miss. 12 days leading up to Christmas when Rocky and I are covering the first 12 issues of Spawn, leading into the new year where we're going to go daily Spawn because I'm crazy. And I had this idea that we want to read every issue of Spawn in 2022. So we'll see how that works out. No promises that we'll get through it, but we're going to give it a try. But meanwhile, we've been going back through these old Spawn issues. They've held up relatively well. Few issues are a little bit of their time. Feel like last issue was that way. This issue is certainly that way. We'll talk about the details of that when we get into the sort of the meaty part of this issue. But that's not to say that they're not enjoyable because as much as I thought last issue was a little bit of its time, it was still okay. Dialogue heavy as McFarlane tends to be with the exposition. Less so in this issue. This issue was just a lot of action. As much as it was of its time, of the 90s, and again, we'll get into the reasons why I'm saying that in a minute. There's a reason that the 90s comics were enjoyable. As much as the 90s get a bad rap, there's a lot about the 90s to sort of admire or to enjoy or to look back at least fondly on that era of comics. They were very much escapism. Almost, I would say, more of an escape than comics of today. Not to say they weren't political comics back then. There were. But I don't know. There was a ludicrousness. There was an insanity. The insanity was dialed up to 11 when you talk about 90s comics. And you literally couldn't take them seriously because they were so crazy. And I'm talking, narratively as well as visually. Who's going to wear 79 pouches and have guns so big that defy physics, So yeah, and like I said, we'll get into it. I mean, you can see the cover right there if you're watching us on YouTube. Look at all those guns that he's got. Like that is right out of the 90s. So
Yeah.
Any general thoughts on this one, Rocky?
This issue 7, like I said, this is revenge. This is like this is Spawn taking it to the bad guy. And as a setup here, something that Todd McFarlane said as he created Spawn back in the day, he said, Spawn gets to do that which Batman can't, and that is basically kill. I mean, in many ways there are similarities, I suppose you could say, between Al Simmons' moral code and perhaps Bruce Wayne Batman, but at the end of the day, Batman doesn't kill. But Spawn does, because that's Al Simmons' background. And of course, when you give somebody who's a killer, I mean, Al Simmons, you could say, is a killer with a moral code, I suppose. But give him the power of the devil, and as the devil told Al Simmons early on, like, you're now an enemy of God. You were an atheist once, Al Simmons, but you're now not only is there a God, but you're an enemy of God. And it's interesting that Al Simmons is sort of ironically making the best of it, and yet even though he's an enemy of God, one could perhaps argue that he's doing a little bit of God's work by getting rid of scumbags. and we know who the scumbags are because Todd McFarlane does a really good job of identifying who the bad guys are in this. And in this issue 7, we finally get the name. You mentioned the name in issue 6, but we never actually got the name of the mafioso who wants Spawn dead. And his name is Don Vito Gravano, otherwise known as Dracula, because he sucks his enemy. He's rumored to suck his enemies dead or something. But
yeah. He lives to suck the power out of
there you go.
everyone. That's the line that McFarlane writes. So take that for what you will. So let's dive into the issue. Let me give the credits first because I realize I haven't been giving the credits for all of these, but it's pretty easy. Story, pencils and inks by Todd McFarlane, letters by Tom Orzechowski. That's it. Colors are by Steve Oliff, I should say. One other thing I'll mention. Early on, the issues are credited to the editor Wanda Kolomajek, which is the maiden name of Todd McFarlane's wife. So that will tell you where the name of Al Simmons' wife comes from, Wanda. What's also interesting is I noticed in issue 7, there's a Terry Fitzgerald that's credited as a story consultant. So it must be some friend of McFarlane's that maybe actually consulted on the story, bounced ideas off of. Probably where the name of Terry, Wanda's husband, comes from in the comic. I don't know that for sure. I'm just speculating. So, if you remember last issue, Spawn got all decked out in guns and pouches and ammunition, and that's how this issue opens up. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the screen there. And so this is what I mean by, okay, let's go 90s. Because like Rocky said, this guy's got the power of hell, right? Now, granted, it's a limited power. It's going to run out. And that's sort of the excuse that Al Simmons gives us. Like, okay, I was a hitman. I work for the CIA. What I'm comfortable with working with is guns and ammunition and that sort of thing. So, I know that I underestimated this Overt-Kill guy. So what's going to make me feel comfortable in battle? Let me go back to the tried and true. Let me go get guns and pouches and ammunition and whatnot. But in a way, it's so silly because this guy has, this incredible power that Malebolgia has given him. Now, again, you can think of it, well, he doesn't want to use that power up because it will bring about his second death, but it's still ridiculous when you stop to think about it. So as he sort of, think of that coolest montage movie, either a Sylvester Stallone or like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando, the music plays and the heroes strapping on all this weaponry. As Spawn is doing this, he's at this army base and they realize there's an intruder there and they want to break in and stop whoever it is. Obviously, they don't know it's Spawn. They don't know he actually has good intentions for these weapons. So Spawn does something here for the first time. And he doesn't even know if it'll work, which I just find so interesting. Like, he doesn't want to fight these army guys, right? He's thinking, there, but for the grace of God, go I. Yeah. He's ready for action, but this is not the action he wants. We're told by McFarlane, his sights are set on a specific target. Unfortunately, getting to that target involves another drain on his powers. Teleportation. He hasn't even tried it yet. He hopes it will work. Like, how do you... Is it, Rocky, is it only that we don't know how to teleport that's preventing us from teleporting?
I guess.
He hasn't tried it yet. He hopes it works.
Yeah, I think... I know, like, it's sort of... You got to wonder, at this point, as a reader, I'm wondering... Are there other powers that he might have too? Like if it's teleportation, it just suddenly, does he have telekinesis? Does he have telepathy? Like I remember back in the day wondering that, and I'm still wondering it now because I'm not a Spawn expert. I mean, I'm reading this. I feel like I'm reading this just for a second time, and so yeah, it does. It maybe lacks a little bit of verisimilitude. It's like, well, he's got the power of, I guess if he's got the power of the devil, I guess the devil can do anything. I guess if the devil can do anything, so can Spawn, but it's just going to drain his power. But, you mentioned before how there was sort of like almost like a clock that started at 9999 that slows the drainage of his power, that you put it out to me because I missed it. I didn't realize that's what it was. But if he's teleporting here, where is the clock that shows the drainage? Oh, there's a few pages later we get. Yeah. It shows. Yeah. I guess it does show it. It's down to 8,031 from 9,999. So I get.
Yeah, the last time we saw that clock, it was on 8092. So I would think teleporting would use a lot of power. And that's the thing. Like, how does he know? Like you were saying last episode, how does he know how much he has left? How does he know? Like, it seems to me teleporting translocation would use a huge amount of power, but apparently it doesn't because the clock barely moves or the countdown barely moves. But how does he know? How does he know that's not?
I mean, what happens when he takes a piss? Does he lose a point every time he takes a shit? I mean, I don't know. It's like, these are the questions that I ask.
Yeah, it's great. Like you could have materialized and been at like 0001, and then you can't do anything. Like, I just think it would have been. I mean, again, even when he's not like actively using the power to heal himself or teleport or whatever, he's still like a strong guy. Can he just like jump up through the roof and run off? I don't know. It seemed really strange. Like if I'm Al Simmons and I've never teleported before and I'm confronted by these guys I don't want to fight, I don't think my first instinct would be I'm going to try to teleport. You know what I mean? I don't know. It was just strange. And it's not just that he teleports. Because here's the thing, it's a little ex deus machina, right? Like McFarlane has written himself into a corner, but not really. There's all kinds of other ways that Spawn could have got out of it, or McFarlane could have just said that Spawn escaped through a window right before these guys broke in. It's almost like he chose to do this so he could show us that he could teleport, so then he could draw this little massive goo and talk about his molecules being ripped apart one by one. Like apparently it's similar to Star Trek teleportation, molecule by molecule, disassembled they're vacuumed and sucked at the speed of light to this preordained location,
Yeah.
and then reassembled.
Well, I like how he reappears in an alley with his bum buddies there.
Yeah.
I should watch how I say that. I don't mean bum buddies as in bum buddies. I mean as his friends who are street people in an alley.
Yeah.
Okay, they're not actually
Yeah.
bum buddies, but they think he's drunk because they're all drunk and they're all getting hammered all the time. So there's a little bit of a cliche that all street people are alcoholics, but they think Spawn is just drunk. And the one guy,
he rematerializes and he says, "Holy mother, I think I'm gonna puke," and he throws up because of the translocation, right? So why wouldn't you think, if you're one of the street people, why wouldn't you? You know, if you're a street person and you see somebody else throwing up, you know, 999 times out of 1,000, it's gonna be because that person drank or ate something, you know, dug some food out of a garbage can and ate it and it was bad, or they're hungover. So
and the one bum sees his face, says, you know, you look worse than my ex-wife, the one bum says.
Yeah. No, actually, he says it's his Aunt Mabel. Cripes, kid, you're even uglier than my Aunt Mabel, and she was ugly. And Spawn screams out, "No!" Yeah. Like, really, that's what's going to get you? But yeah, he actually screams that out for another reason that we'll get to in a second. But we do, like Rocky said, we do get the countdown there of what is left of his power, and you know, he's just chilling with his guns or whatever. The bums, again, they just accept him. Oh, last time I saw you didn't have all these guns and chains or whatever, but all good, man, all good. So then we're back in the tower of Don Vito Gravano, like Rocky said, and Overt-Kill is saying that he killed him because, again, at the end of last issue he thought that he had. Gravano is saying, "Hey, what's going to happen when the big boss dies? Where are you going to go to work? You know, not that we'd want that to happen, but such questions need to be asked." And then we flip back to Spawn and we find out why he was really screaming no, not because he's uglier than Aunt Mabel, but because he's getting another one of these sort of flashbacks, and he's remembering that he was killed, that he was murdered. But interestingly enough, his murderer, he doesn't see his murderer's body. He sees his murderer just as a skeleton. Hearing all the words that the murderer said, basically the murderer saying, we're at war and there's no room for traitors. Simmons, we're tired of your self-righteous grandstanding. So it definitely sounds like the black bag sort of company that Al Simmons worked for was tired of him, like, morally questioning the things that they were doing, as opposed to just blindly following orders. So again, showing that Simmons is truly righteous and was always on the side of Angel, even while he was killing people.
I would add, I think it's showing something more there too, because I find it odd, like that's really weird. Like, if you're remembering who actually shot you, why would you remember them as a skeleton? The way I view this as the devil being extra cruel to Al Simmons, like not allowing him Al Simmons the memory of who killed him, instead making that memory a skeleton just to rub it in. Showing that's how I read that, but maybe I just think it's just the devil being an asshole to Al Simmons again.
I 100% agree with you. It's still Malabolgia messing with his memory, giving just a little bit of memory back. And then we do flip to Wanda, and she's having issues as well. I wonder if that's Malabolgia planting any thoughts in her head. She wakes up and she's screaming, and she's expressing to Terry that I think Al was murdered, and he's like, and Terry's like, we've been down this before. It was an accident. He wasn't murdered. He died defending his country. But I'll, to Terry's credit, he says, I'll go and look again. But what is interesting is, and again, I don't remember who was the one that killed Spawn. I'm sure I knew at some point. Read it in an article or something, probably. But being that we get the memory of Spawn that's still altered, or Al Simmons that's still altered, who's ever doing it, and then we immediately get this scene with Wanda and Terry saying, "Oh, I'll look again." It plants the idea, at least it did in my head, that maybe Terry was the one that did it, or knows, or like Terry may not be the nice guy, that best friend of Al Simmons that he sort of purported to be always. I don't know. I just got that. I'm suspicious of him for some reason because of the sequence of the story that McFarlane gives us with
Well,
it.
and he works for the CIA too, like
Yeah,
Terry.
they were. Yeah, that's part of the reason
Yeah.
they were
So it's
friends. So
yeah. So I agree with you. Like I think that early on, it made sense that you never know. Maybe it is the best friend that had to do with it, and also just to build on the fact that Wanda had this dream, it should be pointed out at least. And what was your impression? I got the impression that her and Spawn, her and Al Simmons were sharing the same dream. That she saw the same dream as he did, or because she saw him being shot. But I got the impression that she also shared that same dream and that they were connected because of their love. Or maybe that's too 90s cliche, but I'm just sort of reading into that. But that's the impression I got. Like suddenly she's having these dreams after all this time. She hadn't had them for such a long time. So I think that's the impression I got, and that had an impact on me because I think that's actually a compliment to McFarlane here, the way that he's drawing their connections. Because as we move through this issue, Wanda, Wanda begins to have, thinks back to that white guy that visited them in issue 3, and talked about their dog, who was, of course, Al Simmons. Of course, he can't come back as a black guy; he's the white guy. So she remembers the white guy who came back and talked to her about her dog. So, but I thought it was well done. That sort of the way McFarlane is connecting them through the dreams and through some suggestion that Malabrosia is connecting them through their dreams just to be extra cruel.
I didn't assume that. I actually don't think that they were having the same dream, only because we saw a few issues ago that Wanda woke up in this exact same way, screaming about Al and don't kill him. Whereas Spawn just got this memory, as indicated by him screaming out "no" in the alley, and it's another memory bomb that has hit him.
But she says that she didn't think he's killed in action. She doubted that he was killed, that somebody had shot him. That's exactly what happened in the dream before, with the skeleton.
Right, but again, she's been having these, and it says in the dialogue box right next to where she says "don't kill him." It says it's been 5 years since her husband's death, and she's come to terms with that. But all of a sudden, in the last 3 weeks, her sleep has been sporadic, and she can't stop thinking about him and his soul, and she can't hide this stuff from her new husband. And again, I think it was issue 3 where we had a very similar scene to this, where she wakes up in the middle of the night screaming. So she's been having these dreams for 3 weeks. Spawn just got the memory. So I don't necessarily assume that they were having like Spawn's, memory bomb right here that went off is connected to her dream necessarily. I think she's been having these dreams for a while. It could be, in fact, go the other way. Maybe because she's having the dream,
Maybe
that it
that's
somehow.
why Al's having them, because she's
Yeah,
having them. That's a good point. It could be.
yeah, yeah. Not to say that maybe she didn't, or they didn't have the same vision or what have you, but regardless, she's been having them longer. He's getting this for the first time in this issue. So after that, Spawn kind of confides in his friend, and he's saying, "Wow, my very existence is putting other people in danger. Apparently, other people wanted to eliminate me back before I was this, and I just can't let them take any more away from me. And these alleys are ours, and we're going to protect them." Because the homeless guy's like, "There's other alleys. If people are coming after you here in these alleys, we'll just move." And Spawn's like, "No, you guys have befriended me. We're going to defend it. This might be crap, but it's our crap. We're going to defend it." So he then does something that is pretty interesting, and I think probably overdue here. I mentioned when he fought Overt-Kill the first time, how his cape and chains seem to get in the way at times. So he actually takes his cape off here. He goes, "Time to streamline." He takes it off. But what he doesn't realize is the cape apparently has some sentience to it, because we're told it slithers off after him, after he's removed it. So on the next page, we get this giant eared guy, where to the point where McFarlane talks about the guy having giant ears. Don't know why he bothered, but whatever. I guess he didn't have enough words to meet his quota for all the exposition. But it's at the SPCA, because Wanda, like Rocky had indicated earlier, is thinking about that white guy. Like this I was fine, living my life, peaceful with my husband Terry and my daughter Cyan. And then this strange white guy showed up asking about Al's dog. And ever since then, that's when I've been having these dreams and I can't get them out of my head. So she goes to the SPCA to ask about this guy, finds out, well, there's nobody here that fits that description. And so that gets her thinking even more. Well, the guy could be from another SPCA, not in Queens, but then how would he have known about the dog? So we're told these are questions that are going to follow Wanda for the rest of the day. So meanwhile, to Spawn, he wants to hunt down Overt-Kill and find out where he is.
But I just want to back up for a sec. The guy she's
Yeah,
talking to at the SPCA, he looks exactly like it's Ross Perot. It's Ross Perot.
He looks exactly
he
like
even
Ross
mentioned
Perot.
that he looks. He has the same ears as Ross Perot, and if you read the dialogue, he even says that people bother him and they bug him about his earlobes, and that's Ross Perot. Bear in mind, this is in 1992. It was a U.S. election. Ross Perot was in the election, so it's very timely. That's why this was. So the joke, if you're reading it, I mean, it's right there. So I mean, it doesn't exactly look like Ross Perot, but it kind of. If you
maybe a caricature.
Oh, it's definitely a caricature of Ross Perot. I mean, I followed Ross Perot all the time because I have $1 billion. If I had $1 billion, look, you got to vote for me. You got to vote for me in this election because I'm a billionaire and I know how to run a business, and we got to run a country like a business. So you got to vote for me, and you don't vote for Bush, and you don't vote for Clinton. You vote for Ross Perot. I remember that. Bad imitation, but I remember that.
Yeah, I mean, he does mention Ross Perot, but yeah, it very well could be. I'll have to ask Todd that if I ever get a chance. Anyway, Spawn does, again, I hate it when they do, I mean, I didn't assume it was him. I could see the resemblance, obviously, now that you pointed out, you're right. I mean, I did read it and saw that Perot was mentioned. But man, you do that and you date the comic so much. You're putting a pin in it and sticking it in a certain period in time, but anyway, I mean, I guess if enough time goes by, people don't even know who Ross Perot is, and then it doesn't matter. But anyway, we're told that Spawn goes around taking out low-level mafia guys until he finds out who's the one that sent Overt-Kill after him. He finds out that it's this man named Dracula, the mob boss Gravano. Goes to his building in Midtown, where Gravano sits very securely because nobody's ever gotten past level 2 of the security, let alone level 12. Spawn obviously is easily able to get there, holds a gun to his head and says, "I need your help, fat boy." And then apparently rat-tat-tat-tat and blows up all the building, or, takes out walls and windows or whatnot, to which Gravano says, "How dramatic." And he says, "Tell your cyborg flunky I'll be waiting for him at midnight, Emerson Pier." And then proceeds to go to Emerson Pier and wait for Overt-Kill. And then during the battle, I mean, there's not really much to say about the battle other than McFarlane is pretty cliche here.
Yeah.
He uses the word terminated. He's a cyborg, they trade some insults that are worthy of any 7-year-old. "You look like crap, the smelly oozy kind." I'm like, wait, really? "I'm going to stomp you so I can scrape you off my boot like a piece of turd."
Yeah.
And then all it takes, it's a very anticlimactic battle. All it takes is for a Spawn to eventually just kind of unsling his biggest gun and fire at Overt-Kill and blast a hole in him, and just he's dead. Like, that's it. It's over. And kind of strange. McFarlane does it sideways on the page too. So you got to turn your comic sideways to get the full effect. And then we have the wreckage of Overt-Kill and X-Payne saying malfunction. And Spawn in his best Arnold Schwarzenegger one-liner. "So who's laughing now?" and that's the end of Overt-Kill, and pretty much the end of the comic, as he sets what does he say? He sets an electromagnetic bomb that will explode, and it won't leave any evidence behind. And then he slips away into the night, thinking about his home in the alley and how he can now curl up behind some rusty dumpster for a well-deserved night's sleep. There you go.
Yeah, it's funny because it was this fight scene was disappointing. I mean, it was beautifully illustrated at the time. You know, why it still is. It's nice, but he just basically shoots him to death, and the
Yep.
cyborg's eyeballs pop out, and his limbs and all his mechanical limbs, everything pops out. I mean, there's one scene where Spawn is literally actually throws the cyborg like Overt-Kill's face right over his shoulder, like he's literally skinned what because there wasn't a lot of most of Overt-Kill as a cyborg, but the part of him that is human is his face. But the skin of his face with one eyeball is sloped is literally hanging off Spawn's shoulder. I mean, he completely decimated and killed this guy, and only in like 3 or 4 pages. And it's just interesting to sort of when you think about how this scene would play out now if it was in a modern day sort of with the modern day narrative. This would have been a battle scene over 2 issues, I'm sure, and it would have had more. It would have been choreographed, I'm sure, much differently than it was back then. But it was just, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because you know what I mean. How often do I mean, I know I personally have bitched about stories being dragged on. Like too much decompression. Let's finish the story. This actually finishes the story. This is, I mean, hey, Spawn takes him out. Why do we need a full issue of a fight scene? It takes. Why not just have 3 or 4 pages instead of 3 or 4 issues, right? So, in a way, that's why I'm enjoying reading this because it's a nice callback, and it's funny. I still remember bits and pieces of this narrative, and I would not necessarily have remembered it more if it would have dragged on for another issue. So it's an interesting dichotomy between the modern and the early '90s take on this stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it says about Spawn that, and again, he was holding back because he underestimated Overkill and he's still reluctant to use up his energy. But he got his butt kicked in the first fight, and then this one, he's never really threatened, and it just takes him unslinging his big gun. And I guess sort of in a way reinforces Simmons' idea that, yeah, that the answer is for me to have guns and carry guns around, even though I have all these supernatural powers. So again, maybe that plays in a little bit with street level villains like the mob that he's going up against. But that is the most '90s thing about these 2 issues,
Oh
just the
yeah.
fact that he's decked out the entire time with all these guns, and maybe it's no coincidence that this issue 7 is dedicated to Rob Liefeld,
Well,
king of the giant gun.
yeah, no, and I should also say that because I mentioned before how all the villains so far in issues 1 through 7 here, all the villains have shit-eating grins on their faces. They're always smiling, that the great big grins. And here, after when Spawn kills Overkill, he's got the same shit-eating grin on his face. He's got a great big grin on his face as he's drooping Overkill's facial skin over his shoulder. As Spawn is smiling with a shit-eating grin from ear to ear with great big white teeth as well. So, this is definitely, I think, from an artistic point of view, McFarlane is drawing Spawn's darker side here. And the irony is that it's Spawn using no superpowers. It's the human side of Spawn, just using the skills that he possesses. Al Simmons were the skills that he relied upon to take out Overt-Kill here. And I think that I like the metaphor of that. I like the symbolism of that. It's the human side that's just as evil. He's just as capable of accessing his dark side when he uses no power as Spawn as when he does use power. So I think that's quite telling in and of itself. I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Yeah, the other thing I wonder about in terms of this giant smile from Spawn, because typically he has his mask on and you wouldn't see it, but of course, in the course of the battle, he pulls his mask off to show Overkill how scarred he is. Um, and I just wonder, the popularity of Venom at this time that's where McFarlane probably first did the giant smiley sort of menacing thing that he keeps doing in Spawn. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I guess we'll see. Uh, yeah, so next time we're going to talk about issue 8, obviously on day 8 of Spawn Mist, which I find interesting. We're not even through the first year, and McFarlane already gets somebody to pinch hit as a writer, but it's somebody who's considered maybe the greatest writer of comics and modern comics history, it's Alan Moore. So, yeah, there's a lot less exposition, less next issue. We'll just leave it at that. So, anyway, that's it for this issue. Anything else you want to add, Rocky?
No, like I said, so far so good. I mean, 7 issues in, I 7 issues in, it's easy for me to see why Spawn was as popular as it was. We got a great story. We got a great story in 7 issues. We got to meet Al Simmons. We know everything. We know all we need to know about him. We know his moral code. We know some of his angst. We know his pain. We know his family. We know essentially his origin. We know what his obstacle is that he has to overcome. And we know the hero. We got hints of the hero's journey that this character is going to take. And we're just at issue 7. And of course, because we're going to be trying to review over the 300 issues, it's very interesting that this hero's journey, where is this hero's journey going to take us? I got to tell you, I actually have no idea. I've never really followed Spawn, and I've always followed the big two. So I'm actually curious, and it's going to be really interesting to see, because we're going to be following the progression of this character through, good Lord, 300 issues. I mean, through 30 years, man. We got our work ahead of us.
Yeah, for sure. So that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. Don't forget to head over to YouTube. Do a search for Comic Space Boom ! That's Rocky's channel. Be sure you subscribe, ring that notification bell, and like this video. If you're checking us out on YouTube and you haven't subscribed to the audio podcast, be sure you head over to your favorite podcasting app or platform. Just do a search for the Comic Source and subscribe so you don't miss any of our audio content. So that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for joining us as always, and we'll talk to you next time.
See you later.